You're listening to episode 115 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness teachers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Dr. Adarves-Yorno joins us to speak about mindfulness and the African Prisons Project. If you're listening to this podcast and find value and insights from what is shared here, know that this is made available from your generosity and the generosity of others like you. I want to thank those of you who are making monthly donations to keep this podcast going. And if you're not yet, please take a moment and go to presentmomentmindfulness.com and click on Make a Donation. One-time or especially monthly donations show you value this work, which can't happen without you. Thank you for your help, your support, and your kind generosity. Mindfulness is still relatively new to prison systems, with many hurdles to overcome in delivering the practice to those living in conditions of extraordinary suffering. Our guest today shares her experiences in bringing contemplative practice to inmates and how they respond to mindfulness. Since 2007, Dr. Adarves-Yorno has been working on change agency. She's been studying their resources, challenges, and influence, and has used a conscious personal development system for their training. One of her newest projects is done in collaboration with the African prison system and revolves around developing authentic leaders and change agents in the Ugandan and Kenyan prison system. A key element of her leadership and change agency training revolves around mindfulness. Her research is exploring, among other things, the impact of mindfulness on areas such as resilience, uncertainty, and identity. Furthermore, she is working on a research project, Mindfulness Within and Beyond the Individual, which looks at the identity and socio-contextual factors that impact our motivations to engage with mindfulness practice. She is also co-creating self-discovery and mindfulness handbooks, which will be tailored for a range of people, ranging from business students to prisoners in Kenya. Inma worked for 5 years as an organizational psychologist for an engineering company in Spain. She has particular expertise in areas such as leadership, organizational commitment, communication, performance, and employee well-being. Our guest today is Inma. Inma, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Ted. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here and very interested in hearing more about this work that you've been doing. But let's start by just having you say a bit about your background.
Okay, I'm a psychologist by background, social psychologist, also very much interested in personal development. I've been passionate about meditation since I can remember. And I was in psychology. My head was very much into doing quantitative work. And then life wanted me to move to business school. And funnily enough, by being in the business school, I had the freedom to do something that it was a little bit more experimental and a bit more spontaneous, and at the same time kind of checking what were the needs of the people instead of what do the books say? And I think that's enough background for this project.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And I appreciate that nuance, that it's not always what the commonly accepted knowledge from books is, but maybe a more personal understanding of what the needs might be.
Yeah, that's right.
So tell us a little bit, how did you get involved with the African Prisons Project? We're going to start with just that one, and then we'll move on from there. But how did you first get involved with that?
I went to a Shoka convention that developed change agents and supports them, because some of my academic work and my personal development work in training others were about investigating who are change agents, how can we help them, and what do they need in order to be successful. So I was invited to one convention in London, and in there I met the director of the African Prisons Project. Keeping the story short, he then invited me to train 5 senior managers that were coming from Kenya to the UK to be trained. And the training was on authentic leadership and change agency. And that's how the journey began.
And as this grew and developed, can you say a bit about how mindfulness got involved with this project? Is that something that's a regular part of your work, or did that come in later?
Well, I've been teaching mindfulness, my businesses, and as well as to my MBAs, but it emerged when I went to Kenya, and all my plans of what I was going to do in Kenya just have to disappear completely. Because the people I trained in the UK were the director of rehabilitation of the whole Kenya and 5 governors. So I told them I would support the change projects, and the change projects were initially about communication and other things. So when I went there, suddenly the needs and what they wanted me to be doing was different to what I thought I was going to be doing. And then it's when I started training them on mindfulness and resilience. So it was very much emerging, yeah.
So things shifted. There was a sensitivity and an awareness of things have shifted, and it grew from there. So how did that then influence and change the project?
Well, what happened is that I thought I was only going once, but when I was working in the largest maximum security prison in Kenya, the group of inmates that I was working with were basically saying, we need you to come back. And then they were responding so amazingly well, and they were so eager to actually teach other people that it seems that it just made sense that I go and I will support the work. So the whole time, my role has been of listening to what was needed and weighing my bit into what was emerging from the future, or what wanted to emerge from the future. Does it make sense?
It does. And I'm curious about the project itself, the work that you did there. What did that look like? What was the structure? What did you do?
Okay, so basically you have to imagine that in Kenya, the religion is very kind of, most of them, they are Christians, but they are really, really strong Christian. So then I have to, many of them are not used to meditating, and imagine in a prison. Meditation in a prison, long meditations is not something was going to be well. So one of the first things I had to do is, first I have to change identities. And I'll tell you how I did that. Then the techniques that we had to use are not the normal meditate for 10 minutes techniques, but I developed something I call the mindfulness on the go techniques. And I remember when I was teaching a group of inmates before I went to this other prison, I have there a group of women in a circle that they have so much tension in the bodies and in those. How could I tell them how to deal with the mind when they have so much tension accumulated? So then is when I have to do some techniques to release mindfully some emotions that they were stored in the body. And then the other thing I had to do as well is this concept that they had is so negative that I also needed to introduce some psychological theories to start with, so they could start understanding themselves a little bit better, why and where they are. And then they could kind of be a bit more open to a bit of a future in which they were leading their future, even if they were inside prison. That's why they have become mindful leaders. And there are a couple of other things, but yeah, I don't know how much you want me to explain at this point.
Well, please keep going. This is really interesting, hearing what kinds of things you did that you needed to change it, because this was not an affluent group of people who are taking a program for set fee because they've heard meditation is good. These are people in a very different place. They were discovering tension and emotional difficulties. So please do say more about some of the things that you had to shift with.
Okay, so then the first thing I needed to do, as I said before, is to change their identities. So we had in the middle of a circle of upside down that signified that we needed to turn things upside down internally, but also we could do that externally too. I needed to empower them by asking guards to kind of leave me alone with them. And then in order to rewire the sense of self, one of the things that I was with is that there were some moments in which I could feel that we were touching something really, really raw, but also really precious instead. And then at those moments, I was asking them to write down a letter to the future selves, telling them something that they know about the knowledge that they were acquiring, or about the little self, because many of them have been hurt. Many of them had a pretty bad life. So then in a way, what will they say to the wonderful little boy or the wonderful little girl that was themselves in the past? So they can heal that relationship. So there was an element of healing, an element of dealing with kind of the emotions that they had accumulated in the body, because we accumulate them there. And the mind can take us to great places, but in this context, the release was really necessary. And then some that is the art of participatory leadership when I train them, or the art of hosting. And the council is the first of the fields that I use. That's where we are all sitting in a circle. And the check-in of the council, the check-in changes depending on the needs. For instance, for the men was very much about what are you having right now? But everything, absolutely everything was welcome. So all hate, all the frustration, all the despair, everything was welcome. And I was holding everything, because if it does not, I was holding it. If that's not being held, transformation cannot happen. But for the women, what I felt is that what we needed to do then is to start talking about something that they were happy about themselves, because the sense of self was so damaged that we had to start with this other question. So the check-ins and some of the other tools that I needed to use were very much based on what were the needs of the group at that moment.
Yeah, it sounds like there was an awareness of the male and the female prisoners that you were working with had different needs. And they were still, both groups are very much in need, but these were different kinds. And you made appropriate adjustments for each one of those groups.
Yeah. With the women, one of the things that we were working with is mindful screaming and mindful shaking. So with the women, it was connecting to something that they wanted to let go of, and then they have to scream it out. When I went to the place, and I thought, how to allow them to get rid of something? And then at that point, we had a bowl. Well, I bought a bowl before I went there. So then, instead the table upside down, we have a bowl, and they were burning things that they wanted to let go of. So initially it was a little bit more private, because you just write it down in a piece of paper and you put it there. But then later on, they really enjoy mindfulness. So it seems that, as you said, they had different needs, but slowly, as they were opening up a little bit more about what the men started also reflecting on, what are the good things that they like about themselves that are not just about being hardcore. Women started also taking some of the other elements slowly. Can I share one anecdote here?
Please do. Anything you're able to share about this would be wonderful.
After working with them for a while, there was one instance in which we were, I think, 80, I like to call them mindful leaders, and they were working in small groups, were working about acceptance and letting go and other things. One of the men got up and said, "Do you know who a strong man is?" And we were all looking at him, saying, "Who?" "A strong man is a man who cries."
Wow.
Imagine in a maximum security prison of African men, for someone to say a strong man is a man who cries, and for his fellow mindful leaders to agree with it.
That's just very powerful to hear, and especially within that place, within that kind of environment. How brave that is. That is strong.
Yeah.
So Inma, you got to see shifts in people that were occurring just as you gave some openings and permission and acceptance of releasing so much trauma and pain that was already present.
Yeah.
So once there was a bit of progress in that, and it sounds like there was progress, how did things then continue? Were you able to introduce other mindfulness practices? What happened then as you got some initial steps in releasing some pain?
Well, it was incredible, because the first time I was there, I'm going to focus now on Naivasha, that is the largest maximum security prison there. The first time I was there, I was just 2 days, and I was working with different practices, but somehow we went to quite a deep place, and then I have to go. I didn't know I was coming back, but they wanted a handbook so they could train others. So then when I came back 8 months later, the work that they have done, training people in the cells, but also trying to get organized, was absolutely incredible. So when I came back, then we were doing more practice. By then, we have 10 groups organized. So some groups were focusing on how to deal with emotions. Some others were focused, for instance, on understanding self. Some others on the actual mindfulness meditation. And the key point here is that I was just a little piece in the puzzle. So they wanted to kind of take some of these tools and then implement others. And I think that I want them to be my teachers, because once they have done that work themselves, then what can we do? So then we continue with the handbook. They translated it into Swahili. They had Monday, Friday class. The same that they learn math and they learn English, then they were learning mindfulness. They had, for instance, one of the inmates there was he called himself a wild child before, and he became a mindful learner. They started doing things with art and with poems and with drama. It's been just incredible. We call it a mindful revolution, because everyone is part on that revolution, and they are just stealing it where it is. And as they say, they wanted to make a difference outside in the community. And it has already prevented crime of people outside in the community, even when they were inside. Incredible.
Say more about that. What was the change there that was noticed?
The change in terms of crime or inside the prison?
Yeah, and just in terms of crime outside once released.
Well, this was many of these men are for a long time there. So only three of them that train have released, and at the moment they are okay. But I'm not following them up, so I cannot talk about these individuals right now. But what I can say is that there was the brother of one of the men there, and you can read his testimonial in the impact report that we have. And basically he was saying that his brother lost his job and started drinking, and it just lost everything. So he was going to kill his family and commit suicide. And somehow he managed to convince the inmate from inside, managed to convince the sister to bring his brother in. I have no idea which techniques he taught him, but basically he didn't commit suicide. He went back to the family and he stopped drinking. And also the level of consumption of alcohol and other drugs inside the prison have decreased. And then the levels of engagement with other rehabilitation programs, as well as levels of engagement with the industry where they are producing things, they have been formed. That's that not only the inmates are saying, but also the governor and other guards. The guards are saying that the job now is much easier. The transformation all the time is beyond my dreams, beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah. So let's pause on that for a moment. What is this like for you, having kindled this awareness, having shared this practice with others, and seeing them work on it on their own for months before you were able to return, and seeing how that's grown and the change? What is that like for you?
I'm very proud of them. The project now is 3 years on, and it has moved to other prisons, and I can tell you more, but answering your question, it's wonderful to be a little piece in this puzzle, this revolution. And it's been wonderful working with them.
So you say this has grown over the past 3 years. Say more. What's happened since this initial start?
Well, as I said before, I trained the director of rehabilitation, who asked me to train welfare officers. So I trained over 50 welfare officers. And then I've been training governors and welfare officers and guards on a number now, quite a big number of institutions. So now we have 2 programs. One of the programs is more formally implemented, in which welfare officers are developing their own materials on how to deal with emotions, and they are training guards and they are training inmates. That's one program. And then the other one that I think is more fascinating is one that I'm referring to here, call it the inner rehabilitation program, where inmates rehabilitate themselves and then they rehabilitate other inmates. So this program, they created a handbook in Kiswahili, in the language and a portfolio, that then we pass formally to a female institution. And the plan is that they were going to be working at to adjust to the needs and the language of some of women that is different, that sometimes of the language of men. And what happened is that from Naivasha, there were quite a few inmates that have to be transferred to other prisons. So what we found is that the program just expanded to the prisons where these mindful leaders were transferred. So there was a prison that I've never heard before called Kitali, where 6 inmates from Naivasha went there, and then they started the training of 60 other inmates, and then they got the welfare officer and the governor to support them, and then Naivasha was then supporting them too. So in a way, this is a revolution, and this inner rehabilitation program started because they went somewhere. And now the other inmates now are being transferred on purpose to train inmates from other places. Oh, so that's how it's expanding. Yeah.
Wonderful proliferation of teaching that the inmates are taking on themselves.
Yes.
So I'm curious what you briefly mentioned. There are some difficulties, and I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit about what some of the challenges that this program has run into.
Well, there are many, but I'm to just tell you, for instance, the fact that in these prisons, some of these prisons are 300% populated. And in Kenya, around 70 or 80%, according to the African Prisons Project, do not have access to basic justice. So the level of external precariousness and internal kind of frustration, and I cannot tell you about that. So that's one of the elements. To train them when they don't have paper, they don't have pen. That's one of the huge, massive challenges that I have. To train them when it's been really hard to communicate with them. It was only because there are some people in Naivasha who took this project on board and who's been coordinating the project. So then I could have conversations with them, but only when there was a bit of money to be able to communicate with them. The financial is just beyond what you can think of. There was one prison in Kodiaga. I trained the governor here in the UK, and I promised him I will go to his prison, only to realize that his prison was one of the worst prisons, and they said that they had an article, it wasn't even fit for pigs. And the roof was leaking, so much so, and the conditions were just inhumane. So the thing that I had was to work towards repairing the roof. Because if the roof is not repaired, how am I going to go there to talk about my roof? So then it took us, like a year or so to repair the roof. This is a prison with more than 2,000 inmates. Before I could go there and work with this group of men. And then there are more. Generally, what I do with challenges, and with the mindful leaders, we call wonderful challenges, is that I accept them, I see them, and once I work with them, I just let them go. So I then.
It's wonderful. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the listeners about your work?
The only thing that I wanted to share is that we all have such a wonderful gift to give, that even in that prison, the latest one I was talking about, where men are in such a horrible condition, and I said, you want to make this world a better place? And they all shouted, yes. So if we want to make a world a better place, simply we just try to do it from a place in which we know a little bit ourselves, and we are beautifully kind to ourselves and to others, and that's what adventures life are going to throw to us. This Kenyan project is an adventure. It has been and it will be an adventure. So we open up and we really stay rooted and mindful, and with our hearts, we, by all the other the type of practice we need to have when we are mindful. The world will be a wonderful place. Challenging, we know challenges are there, and we just need to utilize the challenges and keep on going. And I wanted to say again that there are many, many heroes in this revolution, and many of them are still within bars. So I will dedicate this interview to them.
Well, thank you for that dedication. And for those of you who would like to find out more, I'll have some links on the episode page for this episode about the project. Inma, thank you very much for sharing your work, for doing this work, and for being here with us.
Thank you, Ted. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.